In medieval times, cartographers had a unique way of marking the location of dangerous territories. They put this phrase, "Here be dragons." Melanie Schenkel didn't need a map to know where the dragons were when she was growing up because they were right inside her own house.
New York Times best-selling author and podcaster Melanie Schenkel says of all the things she's done in her life, being a mom is her favorite. When her daughter encountered relentless mean girls in high school, Melanie realized she could relate. For years, she had endured shame, criticism, and verbal abuse from her own mother. In her latest book, Here Be Dragons, Melanie shares how she learned to break generational cycles in her family so she could thrive as a mother, better equip her daughter, and become the person God created her to be.
Melanie Schenkel, author of Here Be Dragons, is here with us, and we welcome you to the program. It's great to have you with us today.
Thanks for having me, Terry. I'm so happy to be here.
What an interesting subject. Your mom, when you were growing up, was bipolar. You didn't really know that during those years, but you were experiencing all the repercussions of that. Talk about what that was like.
It just felt like I never knew what I was going to come home to as a child. Ooh. And what I say now is, and I think I say this in the book, where I'm like, when I think back on my childhood, it felt like a house on fire that I was always trying to escape. And I didn't know how, and I didn't even know that I needed to, but it just never felt safe to me because it never felt stable.
Well, with bipolar, it's kind of like you're being set up by the very illness itself, because one moment is very high and wonderful, and you're riding that wave, and then the next plummets, and that had to be incredibly difficult. You were pretty young when this all began to manifest itself in your life.
I was. I mean, I was 9 years old when my parents got divorced, and I think that kind of began the journey. I always say my dad being in the home, I think, gave it more of a stabilizing factor.
Yes, sure.
And then once that was gone, it was different. And I can remember times with my mom where there would be so much fun, and she would decide as a kid, as it was exciting, because at 10:30 at night, she would be like, "I'm going to repaint the kitchen. Let's get the paint out. Let's redo the kitchen." And I would think that was so fun. And then we'd go to Denny's and have breakfast at 2 in the morning. But then there would be other times where she wouldn't get out of bed for days.
Right on the heels of a high like that.
And you didn't, as a kid, you don't understand what's going on. And this was in the 70s and the 80s, so nobody was talking about mental illness and the different things that were happening.
Really, we're kind of just, excuse me, getting to talking about it today.
It's true.
Talk a little bit about the hard years of growing up. There's nobody who escapes this. I mean, maybe a random few. I don't know anyone, but junior high, high school, those are hard years. How did all of this affect you at that point in your life?
I just think you're already looking for so much security, and you don't have the emotional immaturity to deal with all the things that are being thrown at you. You just want to feel like you belong, and you already have so many insecurities. And I think what I didn't even realize till I was on the other side is the way my mom was constantly fueling those insecurities, where you need a parent who's telling you that's your safe place as a teenager, to say you're loved, your whole self is welcome, I love you just the way you are, instead of all the criticisms.
And we all want to know, who am I?
That's it.
So if the grown-ups around us are struggling with that, it really kind of leaves us hanging. What was the turning point for you in all of this?
Honestly, for me, I think it took leaving for college. And when I got to be about 19, 20, because I think at that point you get to an age where you start to look around at other people's families and go, oh, this is different than what I grew up with. And when I went off to college, my faith became real for me. I got involved in a Bible study at Texas A&M called Breakaway, and it changed my life. And all of a sudden, I began to see myself through the lens that God saw me through. And I realized that I wasn't broken beyond repair, and that I could be redeemed. And that was just not anything that I'd ever been able to process before.
Was there shame and guilt in this for you as a person?
Oh, there was so much shame and guilt. I think that's part of it. At one point I say, I think I walked down an aisle at churches so many times that I said Billy Graham would have been like, "Girl, you're good. Like, settle down.
Yes.
You're okay. You've got it." But I just had so much guilt that I couldn't get past because nobody was giving me the freedom to move past that.
Talk about the road trip you went on that really kind of sealed the deal.
So there had been years of ups and downs with my mom, and the relationship was always taking turns that I never knew. It was like the rug was constantly being yanked out from under me. And so when my daughter Caroline was 6, we went on a road trip with my best friend Gully. We go to visit her parents in Bryan, Texas. And so we were on this road trip, and it was going to be so much fun, and it was a spring break thing, and it was a mother-daughter trip, and I really had worked hard to be just a healthy, great, present mother. And I wrote about it on my website, just our journey, and my mom called and left a message for me, and I knew when I woke up that morning, I saw on my phone
that she had done it.
And I knew what it was going to be. And basically what she said to me is, you're the biggest disappointment of my life. Wow. I'm tired of you. If this is the end of our relationship, then so be it.
So Melanie, here you are. You're now happily married. You have a daughter of your own. You've gone on this trip. Your mother's coming in from the sideline with an axe, really. And those words set with you in your heart and in your mind. Talk about that a little bit.
It settled on me in a way, and there had been years, Terry, where I had thought, do I walk away from this relationship with my mom? Do I do that? But here's what I knew. I can't do it if I'm doing it out of bitterness, and I can't do it if I'm doing it out of unforgiveness, because at that point I'm perpetuating a cycle instead of creating a new healthy cycle, which is what I was wanting to do. But in that moment, it felt like God clearly said to me, and I think it was my mom speaking those words, if this is the end of our relationship, I felt God's permission to say, you can walk away. And that was really the beginning of being set free.
That's a very big deal because of the guilt and the shame involved in it. I mean, God is truly setting you free to move on, move on without all of that. So here you are now, you're a mom, you've got a daughter of your own, and I have to think with all that God has taken you through in that and all you write about in the book, that the one thing you want is for Caroline not to experience what you did. How did you deal with that?
Just you realizing you've got to break those cycles. From the time I found out I was having a daughter, I thought, I never want to make my daughter feel the way that I felt. And I wanted her to know that I was always on her side, that she could be exactly who God created her to be.
So that looked like it was happening. I just smiled when you said all those early years, it was like, I'm mother of the year, my child's turning out well. And then she hits junior high and high school, and tell us about that.
It's, the thing is there's a mean girl epidemic, and
isn't that the truth?
From the beginning of time, I feel like it has just been this thing where, especially high school girls, I think come at life maybe from a scarcity mentality. So one girl's success somehow means less success for them, and they get caught up in the drama. And I think a lot of times even what happens is they're creating these kind of false bonds if they have a common enemy.
Because the need is so great.
That's it. And everybody's just wanting to fit in. And so as long as you're not the target, you're okay.
You're safe.
You're safe. And so when I watched Caroline go through that, what I began to realize is all the things God still needed to heal in me to not continue to perpetuate toxic cycles, so that she could deal with this in a healthy way and to know who she was and who God made her to be.
But Melanie, that is such a... that's an easy thing to say, not an easy thing to do, because you're working with your own healing, and she is experiencing mean girls, but in the end, you brought her through to an independence and an understanding of who she was that doesn't let her be defined by the people around her.
That's right.
And boy, isn't that what we'd all like to hand off to all of our kids. For people who might be going through generational trauma, impact, what's your advice to them? I mean, this is a rocky road.
It's a really hard road to walk. And I think the best advice I can give you is to know that God can redeem anything, and all it takes is one strong, brave person to walk away and say, we're going to do things different, and to start a new legacy. And that can be so hard, because I think people want to tell you, but this is the way it's always been. But that's not the way it always has to be. And when you look at what you can create going forward and what God can redeem, you want to walk that road.
You have to want the redemption more than you're anxious to hang on to the familiarity of the pain.
That's it.
Years later, even though you had this time that you separated from your mom became ill.
She did.
And you had to make a decision about whether you would make a last contact with her or not. You did. You chose to see her. And how did that work for you?
It was interesting, because when my sister called and said, Mom is sick and she's dying, and I really began to pray, like, Lord, do I go? And I kept telling God, I have peace. And what God clearly said to me is, This is not
Wow.
about her piece. This is not about your piece. It's about her piece.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, I can do that. And so I went to go see her that last time. And it's interesting because I was so worried about what she was going to say after all the years we hadn't seen each other. And what she looked at me and said, and I said, it was like the Holy Spirit was in the room, where she said, sometimes it just takes time to work things out.
Wow.
And it just felt like a holy moment and just a minute of closure. And
it's a fascinating book that you have
Thank
written.
you.
I love the title, Here Be Dragons. I want you all to know about that. She shares even more in this brand new book. And it's at the same time, she's an excellent writer. So it's a fun read as well as a very deep dive. And so thank you, Melanie. Here Be Dragons. Get a hold of it. Melanie Shankle, and you will enjoy every page.
thank you so much,
Great to
Terry.
have you
It
here.
was great to be here.